today, super excited. We have a very busy woman here. We were just talking about all the things that Alessandra Torre is doing in her life. And yeah, and I thought I was busy, but now I just feel a little lazy, I think. I don't know. So we're just going to hang for a little bit and let people continue coming in. Hi, Sean. Gayla's got her puppy there, I think. Who's there with you, Gayla?
We were just talking puppies, Gayla. I have one on my lap, a adult dog on my lap, and then I have a puppy that's sound asleep beside me. But I have no doubt that the puppy will disturb me at some point during this. So you'll have to bear with me.
Yes, this is Bruno. He thinks he's supposed to be in everything I got going on.
As he should. He's a dog.
Exactly. He's our baby.
Great name.
What kind of a dog is it?
He's an English Springer Spaniel.
Oh, okay.
Nice. Nice.
He's great.
All right. So we are 3 minutes after. I will just continue admitting people as we go. Alessandra's going to give an intro of herself, but first I just want to say thank you so much for coming here. We're really excited with everything you've done with writing and Inkers Con. We're just super excited to hear what you have to say. We're going to talk about books. We're going to talk about Inkers Con. Ask questions as always. I'll be here to monitor the chat. And, if there's anything you'd like to know, this is the chance to answer. So, Alessandra, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Absolutely. It's so great to be here, guys. Sorry. Oh, I felt that sneeze coming. Okay. It's so great to be here and to meet you all and to chat books. So my name is Alessandra. I also write under A.R. Torre. So I wear two different hats. Alessandra is spicy romance. A.R. Torre is psychological thrillers and domestic suspense. I am a hybrid author, so I am both traditionally and self-published. I started in self-publishing in 2012. I've written over 30 novels, and I hit the New York Times list 7 times, all with self-published books. So I used to say that I found my greatest success, and my greatest success was always with self-publishing. My traditionally published books all bombed. That is no longer the case now with my current publisher. My A.R. Torre books are taking off. But that's kind of like my history and what I can talk to you guys about if you have any questions. And I'm just really excited to have this conversation with Kristina.
Nice. So welcome. So now I would like to start. I want to talk about Inkers Con a little bit that's coming up. Because we've invited all of our community to go to it. And there's a couple of things. One, can you talk about it and tell us what it is? And the other, I'd really like to know why you founded it, how you transitioned from an author to running this great big conference for writers. It's a kind of an exciting story, so I'd love to hear it.
Absolutely. Yeah. So if you're not familiar with Inkers Con is an annual conference. It is held in person in Dallas, where we basically the purpose of that is to bring all the speakers in one place and film in high quality with our videographer team. And then we package everything and release it digitally. So the digital launch is coming up soon in 9 days on July 20th. And Inkers Con is focused on indie fiction authors. So anytime you're approaching any type of education or conference, it's very important that you check to see whether it is for fiction or non. And if it says it's for both, I would urge you to not do that because fiction writing is very different than nonfiction. Fiction marketing is very different than nonfiction. Business and advertising often are the same. So we are a fiction and an indie or self-published, though we do have some traditionally published authors that attend conference. So we have 4 main areas: business, marketing, craft, business, marketing, and advertising. Those are what our presentations are on. We have over 25 presentations. Fictionary is doing a presentation on story structure, believe it or not, at the conference. And then we have 8 best-selling authors that come and do live Q&As. We have dozens of live attendee discussions on any range of topics. Any attendee can create and host a roundtable discussion. And we have basically 2 weeks of full events where we have live events, interactive events, but everything is recorded. So if you're not available during that launch period, July 20th to August 2nd, you can jump in anytime. You have 6 years of access to that content. So a lot of our attendees purchase the access, and then they watch the classes at their own pace, and whenever they need them. So that's InkersCon.
Yeah. So let's talk about author transition to InkersCon. What happened there?
So InkersCon has been around 6 years. I started writing 12 years ago. And when I started in 2012, there was little to no author education. There were classes in craft. It's funny. It's like gone like the exact opposite. Now, no one seems to care about craft. Everyone cares about marketing. But at the beginning, the only thing there was craft. And it wasn't really online instruction. It was like books and that sort of thing. I am self-taught, so I really did not know what I was doing, both in the writing of the book or in the marketing aspect. And for the first few years of my career, it was very much like I was just like traveling blind. Like I would just go in one direction with my eyes closed until like I hit a wall. And then I would pivot and I would go another direction until I hit a wall. And that was like how I navigated my first few years. And I said, if I ever figure this out, like I want to make, at the time it was like, I want to make like a writing for dummies or marketing for dummies. And so initially when I did figure it out, then I started online courses in that. And I quickly realized like, there's my process and how I do things, but my breadth of knowledge is only like this much, and I could teach about audiobook marketing, but I'm not killing it in audiobooks. So I want to bring in someone who's doing, who's a rock star in that area. And so then when I was like, let me pull in this person, let me pull in that person, who would I really want to learn, like, story settings from, or that sort of thing? Like, who are the best people in these different areas and that are succeeding right now? And that was that idea of bringing all of those people together. Initially, it was going to be like an online summit. We were going to bring them all together and film it for an online release. And then it was like, well, if we're doing all that, we might as well invite authors to be there, and that was how suddenly a conference was born. So that was 6 years ago, the first InkersCon, and it's just been growing, ever since. And so now we have, thousands of attendees from around the world, and it's just a fantastic, positive community.
Yeah, we are super excited to be presenting there this year. It's our first time, so we're looking
really
forward to it.
about
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so we know the where that started. Let's go back to the start of your writing. How did that come about? What was your journey?
And I do just want to say before I jump into that, if you are interested in InkersCon, be sure to use the link that Fictionary has, because it'll save you money off of, they have a special discount for you guys. So when I started in 2012, I had quit my job. The company I was working for sold, and so we all lost our jobs. And I was just trying to figure out kind of like what I wanted to do, like with the rest of my life. That was kind of like, I was just in this like weird place where I was trying to figure out like what I wanted to do. And I was a reader. I loved to read. I read I was a bookworm my whole life. And I read anything and everything. I read every genre there was except for romance. I was such a snob against romance. Like I just thought romance. Like I just was so snobby about it. So of course I sit down. I read On Writing by Stephen King. And if you guys haven't read that, it's the number one. Anytime I meet a person, they're like, oh, I'm starting to write a book. The first thing I do is I order On Writing and I send it to them, because it for me was just such a catalyst, which made me think like, I can do this. This is something I want to do. Let me sit down and try to write a book. So I read On Writing. I thought, like I'll just try writing a book. Stephen King made it sound like easy and manageable, and I thought I could do it. And so I sat down, and out comes a romance, which baffled me, like surprised me more than anybody. A spicy romance. And so I told my husband, I said, we cannot tell anyone that I wrote this book. It has to be a complete secret. You're taking this secret to your grave, And he said, okay. And then he went into the next room and he called my sister, and he's like, Alessandra wrote a book. No one's going to buy a copy. It comes out tomorrow. Will you buy a copy? So on my first day, I had 3 sales. One was me, one was my husband, and one was my sister.
Nice.
And I was like so excited at the idea that like someone else had purchased this book. But it was that was how it started. So Alessandra is a pen name. And my first book was called Blindfold Innocence. When I read it now, I cannot read it now. It's like cringeworthy. It's like, it was my first book. And for you guys, the more you write, the better and better you will become, and the easier it will become. But a lot of times readers love it, but for me, it's painfully bad in my opinion. But anyways, I self-published it, and it took 3 months, and then I became an overnight success. And that overnight success, this is such a longer story, Kristina, than you wanted. But
Just do it. Just do it.
This part's really interesting, so I think I should tell it to you guys. I slowly built up to like 30 sales a day, and I was getting some good reviews. I had great reviews. And then my husband and I were going out of town to Memphis, which is like an 8-hour drive. And I was like, I think I'm just going to rewrite my book description. And it was just a whim. Like, I had written my first book description when I self-published it. So I just sat down and I wrote another book description, and it took me like 5 minutes. I didn't save the first book description. I just wrote over it, and I uploaded it to Amazon's KDP software. And then we like got in the car and took off. And as a new author, at least I would obsessively check my sales. It was like every 5 minutes, I'd refresh my sales to see if I had another sale. But for 8 hours, I was in the car. This is 2012. I didn't have like the technology that we had nowadays. And so it was 8 hours before I got to the hotel and I checked in. And then I immediately went upstairs and checked my sales. And I had 120 sales from the time that I had left Destin, where I lived at the time, Destin, Florida, to Memphis. And I was like, oh my gosh, there's some sort of a glitch. Like, I was certain there was some glitch like in the software. And but by the time I went to bed, I had like 400 sales. And when I woke up the next morning, I had 2,000 sales that had happened like during the night. And my book just started going bonkers. Like, it was in the top 5 of Amazon. I was selling like 3,000 copies a day. And it was all because I changed my book description. That was literally the only thing I changed. And what it taught me was, at the time I had a very like scandalous cover. It was a very clicky cover. And I think people were clicking on that cover, and then they would read the book description, then they go, nah, and they go somewhere else. And I was losing a high number of sales. And so when I fixed that like broken piece of my packaging, then they kept clicking on that cover, but then it was converting to sales. And so then Amazon started showing that book to more and more people. And publishers started calling me, agents started calling me. And within like 3 weeks, I had a multi-6-figure publishing deal with Harlequin, and multi-book deal. And that was like my life changed just instantly.
So, okay, what was the difference in the book descriptions?
Well, that's what everyone wants to know. And I was like, why didn't I didn't realize at the time that I was like creating my whole career, like in that moment, like, dogs are barking, we're running around packing, like someone needs a snack, and I'm just like out there. So I think, looking back, and someone on Goodreads was a saint and tried to find me the original, but I think what it was is my cover was very sexy and my book description was not. And they just didn't meet, you know what I mean? Like, it was like, oh, I thought I was clicking on this really sexy book, but I'm reading this description that isn't really steamy. And so I think that I unknowingly or unintentionally leaned into more what I was hearing people leave the reviews about and mention, and they really loved like my main character. So I focused more on that in that description, and at the end versus the first one, which I think was probably more of just kind of like almost like a summary of the book versus like a slicker sales, intrigue pitch.
Very.
But I wish I had both. I wish I could put both up side by side so someone could easily see.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm sure many people, when you tell that story, like, can I see? Because I want to do the same for my book, which really does show that your book description has to match the book cover, has to match the genre altogether, right? Even after all that hard work you put in to write the book, it's that paragraph, which is
the hardest make or break it. 100%. Yeah.
So, my next question was, what's the most important lesson you learned? But I'm thinking maybe that is it.
No, that wasn't it. I would say the most important lesson I've learned is I am successful despite myself. And that is because for the first 7 years, I wrote whatever I wanted to write. I was writing 3 to 4 books a year. Now I only write 1 book a year, but I was writing 3 to 4 books a year. And I would just write like whatever I felt like writing, so which meant I wrote like a chick lit, and then I wrote, a dark romance, and then I wrote a rom-com, and then I wrote, this beach romance. And so readers never knew what an Alessandra Torre book was going to be. You know, it was like they followed me because they liked the last book they read. And I was very engaged in social media and I was very engaged with my audience. And they knew that even if they did, even if this wasn't like their typical book, they would read it. But what I should have done, and I, at Inkers Con, the very first year, 6 years ago, in Amazon, I sat down with an Amazon rep and they told me, they said, Alessandra, the authors that are killing it, they're writing like Irish folklore, you know, time travel, and they're hitting it in that genre. And then they're writing that same type of book over and over and over again. And those are the authors that are making money and that are blowing up. And I was like, oh, and so they're like, so you need to find your niche and stick to it. And I was like, oh, that's such great advice. And I walked away and I was like, huh, I'm not doing that. I'm going to write whatever I feel like writing. You know, you can't tell me what to do. And I have left millions on the table because of that. It wasn't until A.R. Torre has behaved. Like my A.R. Torre book writes psychological domestic suspenses set in California in rich environments, right? Like rich people behaving badly. That is A.R. Torre's book, and that is what you're going to get every time. But it took me 7 years to do that. And all my other books were standalone. My advice to anyone, write in series, figure out what you want to write, figure out what you are going to be known for, and then write that over and over again. Doesn't mean that your books are going to be all cookie cutter. You can have different plot lines, you can have different whatever, but your books need to have the same feel. They need to deliver the same experience. You need to have cohesive branding so that when someone's like, oh, a Tom, you know, Clancy novel is this. I know what a Tom Clancy novel is. I know what, you know, a Daniel Steele book is going to be. I don't have to even read the description. I know that I like that type of thing. Alessandra Torre, who knows what you're getting? You know what I mean? I mean, it's like a bag of tacks. Like it can be a ball or it can be a spiky thing. You don't know. And so that means I have to sell them every single time on that specific book. And it makes growing an audience extremely hard.
Right. Super interesting. So you mentioned in there you went from 3 books a year to 1 book a year. How come that changed?
That changed because Inkers Con takes up an enormous amount of my time. It's something that I really love though. And for me, I was starting to get burnt out. I was writing 3 to 4 books a year, which meant I was always under deadline. Like as soon my husband, I'd be like, well, can you just wait till we like hit this deadline and then we can have this conversation. We can go on this trip or we can do this thing. He's like, but then you're going to have another deadline. And it was true. Like I'd finished my first deadline and then I had the deadline of rewrites, you know? And then it was like, well, my book releases in 2 weeks. I can't possibly do anything. Like I have to focus on this book release, you know? And by that time I'm already like, it's time for another book's first draft deadline. So I was really headed for burnout, and Inkers Con gave me what I needed, which was like a community. It gave me like, I started learning so much more because I was watching speakers to try to recruit speakers. And, you know, so I was just taking so many more craft classes and marketing classes and that sort of thing. And I was just getting so much smarter. And so that helped my backlist grow. It helped my income off my existing books. So I make multiple 6 figures a year off old books. So I don't have to write.
Right.
I don't have to write like I used to. I lived and died off every book release. It was like, you know, if that book release wasn't successful, I wasn't going to pay my mortgage, you know, and that's like a horrible place to be, like in terms of stress and trying to create like a creative product. And to top it all off, I was a diva. I'm like, oh, I'm just going to write whatever, you know, the writing muse says. Like, you know, I mean, I should have been a businesswoman. Like, you know, I mean, I should have been smart about that. So, yeah, so it was also, I had another revenue stream because of Inkers Con. So that took some of the weight off my books. But that was really when I started transitioning, and then I started just getting involved in other aspects of the author world. So it cut the time that I could write down significantly.
Yeah, so it's interesting. So still taking craft classes well after being super successful as an author.
Mm-hmm. Craft is the number one. If you can only do one thing, make your product as great as you can. Like,
So this group, this community, or every person here is here because they're serious about their craft and working hard and trying to learn every day. And I mean, part of my joy in running this community is that I learn something new every day. And I often think of writing as having homework for the rest of your life because you can never know it all. And there's always something more to do. And you can't, I just wanted just this one thing I'll finish and then we can do something else. And so I think that's probably very common among the writers here, that it's such a passion and such a joy that it's hard to go and do something else when you
I
have.
love it. And I think it's the same as like, you see like professional golfers who take golf lessons and use a caddy. You know what I mean? It's not,
Right.
every course is different. Every golf course is different. Every book is different, And there are times like I'll be super intimidated by a book, and I just always go back. Like craft is my crutch, It's like when I don't, but I love that. It's like finding it. It's like getting a new, like, I don't know, pot in your kitchen that you're like, oh, I can't wait to like cook on this.
Yeah.
So I love that. And writing is the like well that never stops, I mean, it's just, we can switch genres. We can write, a different point of view that we haven't written before. So there are so many different things. I killed a character, my main character, my first person point of view character. I killed her halfway through my book recently. And my agent's like, I don't know if we can do that. Like we were trying to think like of a book where that had happened, where like you were solidly there with that first person and then they died. But it was like, I was like, I gotta do it. Like it was so exciting to do that. So yeah, absolutely. Never, like someone said in chat, never stop learning.
Yep. Yep. That's Jothy. I know. And so you can see you're totally in the right community
Yeah,
for
we're
this.
preaching
I mean,
to the choir.
me
Yeah.
personally, I'm feeling very motivated to go away and start and write something now, except I'll stay at least till the end of the call.
Please, please.
I'm gonna hang up. I have to go right now. I'm sorry. Just have to go. So you mentioned social media a little bit. What was your start in that, and
Yeah.
any recommendations on to-dos, not to-dos
I
for
would say with social media, with everything on the marketing front, it's very easy to look at other authors and be like, okay, this is a successful author and this is what they're doing. And you have to realize that the successful authors that you're seeing a lot of, for the most part, have teams. You know what I mean? So it can be very intimidating, or very much like we're running around trying to do everything because author XYZ is doing everything and they're successful, And it's very hard to realize, or it's very hard to maintain that. You can't do it all. You can't write 10 books a year and be on all of the platforms and do all of this and, have a family and like sleep at night. So I would suggest that if social media I would suggest you figure out kind of what your pillars are going to be of how readers are going to find you and how you are going to communicate with readers. Email list should 100% be one of those pillars. And email list should be one. And if you're on social media and you have the capacity for social media and the mindset for social media, then I would pick one social media that you're going to be on and create accounts on all of the other social medias. On those, just put your profile, a link to your book, and say, hey, I'm not typically on X or whatever it is. But if you're interested in my updates, follow me on Instagram or wherever it is, and just have all of those other places where people can still tag you. Someone can click on that tag, they can see a link to your book, and then they can be like, oh, if it's important for me to stay in contact with this author and find out what they're doing, I know that I need to go to TikTok or I need to go to Instagram or Facebook or wherever they're at. And then just have that one social media that you focus on, because it is like exhausting. And multiple pen names is even worse. I don't do that. I am Alessandra A.R. Torre on all of my platforms. And I only have one mailing list, but it's a segmented mailing list. But social media can really be kind of the theft of joy in this. You have to really be careful and just make sure that you're someone that can handle, isn't going to have like comparison, envy, and can just deal with like the good and the bad that social media can bring. And it's also extremely detrimental to your productivity. At least it is for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the first time I've heard somebody say the advice of just put a link back to the one you're active on. That is just amazing advice to do that. It seems so clear now. You say it and think, well, of course,
Yeah.
except, I mean, I fell in that
So
trap too.
most people post like, they'll be like, oh, I'll create one thing and I'll post it on all of these things. And that's great. But then you have to go respond to comments on all of these things. And every time you're opening up one of those other things, like it's a rabbit hole that can you can see a cute puppy video and click on it. Before you know it, like 15 minutes has gone by or 30 minutes. So yeah, I try to just do like one. And there's nothing wrong with saying I'm on a writing hiatus, or I'm in the writing cave. I'm going to be offline for the next 90 days. Sign up for my newsletter if you want to know, as soon as I'm back among the living.
Nice. Yeah. And then you're doing your writing, because it is hard to find that space in your day, of course, because you need a lot of space in your day for writing. Kit says, so Kit is a very successful author, USA Today's bestseller. So she just said, I launched my 90-day SM program today across 3 platforms. Congratulations, Kit. That's fantastic. True History Mysteries took weeks to put together. Hers is automated. Yeah. So she's very active writer. So let's just talk about email marketing for a little bit. When you first start, so a common question is, what do you write? Like, what do you put in your emails that keeps people wanting to come back to your email?
Yeah. And this is going to be really hard, especially for authors that take a long time to write a book. And when I say long time, I mean, I'm not trying to judge anybody, but some people take years to write a book. Some people take months. And so it can be like, well, what am I going to talk about during these 9 months, in between a release or something like that? And there's a fantastic class, first of all, at InkersCon this year. It's taught by Tracy Barna, and what she talks about there, it's extremely actionable information. So I encourage you to watch it and attend it. But one of the things she talks about is like content pillars. Like you have 2 or 3 things that you will be communicating with your email list about. And it doesn't need to be books. It is great if it's books. And what I talk about in between books and that sort of thing is what I'm reading. I talk about, hey, bud, will you shut that door? I talk about what I'm reading. I talk about what I'm working on, where the inspiration, I might include a little snippet of a scene that I wrote. I'll talk about, a playlist that I'm listening to, why I chose this setting for the book, something I'm struggling with the story. So I'll talk about all of those things, but I also then have other content pillars. So like an example of a content pillar would be that I incubated like 10 eggs and hatched baby chickens. And so I kept my newsletter list like abreast of the entire process. Like I saw this rooster and I was like, oh my gosh, like that's the most beautiful rooster I've ever seen. And we stopped and we talked to the lady and she was like, if you'd like to buy his hen's eggs, they're, fertilized. And so the whole process of like finding an incubator and then like, what am I going to name the babies, and I don't know what, gender they're going to be. And then having like 6 babies and, I was their mom, they didn't have a mom, and teaching them, how to roost and that sort of thing. So all of that, like, yes, they're readers of XYZ genre, but it's also like, they're interested in the different parts of our life or, and then every time someone sees a chicken, like it's been years since that happened. It's been 4 years since that happened. I still get readers who send me chicken shirts, or they'll just like see a chicken, like at a farm somewhere in Montana, and they send me a picture of it, or it reminds them. And and a lot of times it reminds them and they're like, oh, I wonder what Alessandra's released lately. You know what I mean? So, there are a lot, Jana DeLeon, who writes Cajun mysteries set in Louisiana. Like she would always share like shoes she bought, or people share like recipes that they're working on or things like that. So it's whatever, it needs to be something organic and something that it might be like the home remodel that you're doing, or you're just like looking for your first house or something like that, or your new puppy, but whatever it is, like there's, you can have different content pillars, and they don't have to be personal. If you don't want to share anything personal, it can all just be about what you're writing or what you're reading or what you're watching on TV, and how it's affecting your life.
Yeah. And now I'm picturing you sitting in a nest beside a chicken going, this is how you roost. Sit here like this.
Oh, I had so much chicken drama. Like, you would not believe how like catty and drama filled chickens are. Like, they each had their own personalities. I had like a rooster who brought some random, strange neighborhood hen over and tried to infiltrate into our herd, and I was like, you already have three women, like, stop. It was great. Like, it was just nonstop fodder.
And have you put any of them in your books?
I had a book, and so then it was a great segue to me being like, you guys are gonna love Cocky, which is a baby chicken that I put in my story. And I'm sorry. And so yeah, like I would segue into, and so then I wrote a chicken character, or a character that had a chicken, and so it was great. Yeah,
Perfect. That sounds really fun.
yeah.
All right, so now we've done kind of the writing thing. Let's talk about editing and your different editing processes, and when do you start editing, and what kind of editing do you do, and then when do you go to professional?
I love that. So with my first book, I had a budget of zero. And a knowledge base that was just as bad. So with my very first book, I didn't know anything, and I wrote it, and I read through it a couple times, found a few typos, thought it was good, and I popped it up. Now, fast forward, with everything I've learned. So I have an extensive, first of all, I'm a pantser. I'm a pantser that does as much outlining as I can, but it's very rough outlining. I use oftentimes what I call like the postcard method, which is like I'm just writing different scenes, like one-liners of different scenes on postcards, and I just kind of put them in order and then kind of move them around. And I use different color postcards for different point of views. But my first drafts are extremely messy. They're meandering. Sometimes I'm going in a direction that I think something's going, and then I change it. So my first drafts are really rough, which means that I have to be a good editor. And I personally love editing. It is my favorite part of the process. I absolutely adore it. I get so excited when I get to jump into like a messy manuscript and make it better. And my books go from if anyone read my first draft, they'd be like, this woman needs to quit her job and like do something else. Cause it's just painful. But I love like seeing the transformation. So I normally have to, I go through 4 or 5 rounds of self edits, and they're pretty extensive self edits. A lot of times, the first time I go through and I just leave comments everywhere, and I kind of rewrite as I go, but it's very much like, this scene needs to be nixed, rewrite this entire chapter. Like, I don't need to do this. And once I finish those rounds of self edits, then I go through and I outline like the whole book. And I'll just do one-liners for every scene, but I just do an outline. I'll color code it a lot of times because I do a lot of multi-POV, multi-point of view books. And so I'll color code it just so I can see like, oh, like, or I'll have multiple plot lines. And so I'll color code it by that. So I can be like, oh, I really stayed in this one plot line, like way too long before, and so I try to make it evenly dispersed. So outlining allows me to see my manuscript, and I'll do that like using an Excel spreadsheet. And so then I'll go through typically and rearrange and move things around. I personally use Scrivener. I don't know if Fictionary has their own software, but I'll rearrange scenes, and then I'll just go through and do another read through, and all of that before it ever sees an editor. So then I have, with my traditionally published books, I have developmental editor, and then I have like a copy line editor, and then we have beta readers and proofreaders and sensitivity readers, and it's just a really long list of people that it goes through. But with my self-published books, I have a developmental editor. Then I typically have like a line copy, but it's almost more of a proofreader because my voice is very developed at this point. So it's not so much that I need help with that, but I can't see that I use the word like over 3 times in this paragraph, where a lot of times they can. So, yeah. And then I normally have 3 or 4 proofreaders because proofreaders never find everything. It's just impossible. But proofreaders are also cheap. So I have a lot of free proofreaders.
Nice. Sean says, do you find the real story reveals itself during the first draft, defying some of the assumptions you had of what the book would be about during the outlining process, or your loose outlining process? Let's call it that.
Yes. So a lot of times I start the book thinking it's going to be like XYZ. Like I have a pretty clear idea of the beginning, what's going to happen at the end, and some like stops along the way. But a lot of times the ending, it'll go like in a completely different direction. So my characters will really take off. And my hardest part, well, the psychological process I go through is that for me, it's hardest in the first like 20% of the book in terms of like figuring out the character's voice. A lot of those scenes that I'm writing, it like when I read it back, it's almost like schizophrenic. I'm still trying to figure out kind of who like my characters are and what their personality is like. So a lot of times when I go through edits, that's the first chunk is like me fixing so that it's all consistent. When I'm writing the book from 30 to 60%, I hate the book. I'm so bored with the book. I'm just like drudging through the scenes. I'm like, no one's going to want to read this book. This is a dumb idea. I'm continually talking myself out of the book as I go. And that like freaked me out in my first few books. Now it's like a normal part of my process. So I'm like, oh yeah, like this is the part where I hate the book. And I did an interview with Dean Koontz. And if you've never read Dean Koontz, he writes like these brilliant, amazing stories. And he said, it wasn't like I prompted him this. Like he said that in that middle bit of the book when writing it, he's like, I'm convinced it's horrible. It's garbage. And I loved hearing that because first of all, it just took me a couple years to realize like, oh, like this is the normal process. Like it's not, this book's horrible. It's just like, I just hate it right now. And I'm sick of it. And he was the same way. And he's written 100 books, he outsells Stephen King. So that's how I am. And then once I start approaching the climax, then I'm like, oh yeah, this is why I like this book, and then I write shorter and shorter. And then my last bit of the book, I fly through those scenes. Like in rewrites, I have to go flesh out, but I get so excited that I'm like at the end that I'm like tripping over myself to try to like reach the end. So during rewrites, I go and I really have to like add extra scenes, extend those scenes. And so my last 10% becomes much longer.
Nice. And that's really great to hear for everybody, right? That we all go through that self-doubt of yuck, this is terrible. It's funny you mentioned Dean Koontz because very early on, I read one of his books and I'm forgetting the title, but it's about two twins who can teleport and one's evil and one's good. Mm-hmm. And I was alone in Tokyo in my apartment that week reading this book thinking, but the bad guy could just teleport in. It just scared me so much. You think, why am I reading this book now? It's a terrible book to read, but he's so vivid and so terrifying that you think,
he's fantastically talented. And, his writing process is he will write a chapter and then he will go through and edit that chapter 10 or 15 times before he goes to the next chapter. He will not finish that. He will not move on to the next chapter until he goes through, edits. Then he prints it out, edits by hand. And then when he is done, then he moves to the next chapter. And I was in New York talking to we share an editor. And I was talking to her and she was like, when he turns in a book, she goes, it's so ridiculously clean. And it's because he's edited it like to death. And she's like, we do so little, like, when his manuscripts come in. But I thought that was really interesting. And when I shared that with someone and they switched that process and they were like, but you have to be really careful because a common issue that writers have is the over edit. Like they never move forward because they keep changing. And so I've always like cautioned writers, like for some writers, like that's a great process for them. But for a lot of authors, like they'll just never move forward with their book because they're constantly doubting and changing it. And he's a pantser. Dean is a pantser.
Amazing. Hey. All right, everybody here, type a Y in the chat if you're a pantser and then no if you're not. I want to see who we got.
And in that middle part of the book, oftentimes when you're like, oh, there's this better idea that's over here, I should stop this book and go write that book. That's the other thing that I used to be really potentially guilty of. All right.
Yeah,
so you can have a lot of hybrids.
Yeah. And both. So mixed, yes and no. Like you can just see the variety of authors here, right? Of how people do things. And, a planter.
Yeah. I like planter much better than panty liner. Panty liner is what I was taught. And I used to give webinars and I would mention that. And so one of the comments is like, I refuse to be known as a panty liner. I'm a
Yep.
planter. I was like, oh, that's so much better.
That's
I
better. A
love
plant is
that.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I just believe if you understand the structure of a story, you can have any process that works for you. And it should be fun for you as the artist, right? This should be it, most of it. I mean, we're all gonna have the down
Yeah.
moments, we all know that, but most of it should be a joy. And if you've got a strong understanding of craft, it doesn't really matter
No.
what your process is, as long as it works for you. And what I do is sort of irrelevant, or what you do or somebody else does. It's really about the person writing and enjoying the writing, because it can be really hard. And I remember thinking the first time, I'm going to write a novel. How hard can that be? Like, what was I thinking? I don't know. I knew nothing, right? So you just got to kind of find it. Okay, with all of your stuff you have going on, so writer, inker, con, etc., what's the hardest part for you right now?
I'd say my hardest part right now is just like time. It's finding the thing. I did make a big change in my life like 2 years ago because I was doing Inkers Con. I was doing writing. I mean, I have another full-time job. My family just bought a coffee shop. So like I just don't have a lot of time. And I really became smart with my author business in terms of like, what are the things I did these Venn diagrams where I would do like, okay, this is what I love to do in this business, right? I love to, I love to make book teasers. I love to write. I mean, hopefully writing is what you love to do. But this is what I love to do. And this is what I hate to do. And I'm sorry, I'm messing up my Venn diagrams. This is what I love to do, and this is what I'm good at doing, right? Those are the two things, because they can be very different things. I love to make teasers, but I'm not great at making teasers, right? And so where those intersect, that is where like I should be spending my time, right? And then I made another Venn diagram of this is what I hate doing in this business, and this is what I'm bad at in this business. And where those two intersect, 100%, you should eliminate that. And a lot of the stuff in this business, you can just draw a line through it and stop doing it, and it doesn't affect anything. Like we think we have to do all of this stuff, and honestly, we don't. But you should outsource or hire out or find a way to eliminate that. And so what it meant is I really focused on like, here is my giant pile of stuff that I have to do. And I really narrowed it down to like 4 things. Like I'm the only person that can respond to emails, right? In my inbox. I mean, that isn't actually true. I think I could outsource a lot of that, but right, I'm the only person that handles my inbox. I'm the only person that writes. Almost everything else I can outsource, and I have. And that made my life just a lot easier. But that's what I'm still struggling with is I'm a multitasker, and that can make it very in the writing, it makes it very hard because as soon as I start writing, I'm like, oh, I'm just going to respond to this email really quick. I'm just going to do this really fast. And that is very disruptive, like to my creative process.
Mm-hmm. So do you have blockout times or like turn off notification times or anything like that?
I write from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. That's when I,
Really?
yeah, which
Ooh.
is not ideal. It's actually really bad because I am emotionally and physically zapped at that point. But it's the only time that my phone isn't going off. It's, I can turn off my phone. No one in my house needs me. No one on social media needs me. You know what I mean? I'm not getting distractions, and I can just sit. So I'll just like chug energy drinks, and I fall asleep a lot of times, like mid-sentence. And I'll take like a 15-minute nap, and I keep going. And that's what I do when I'm under deadline. And that's what works.
Wow.
Yeah.
What time do you get up in the morning then? If you go to bed at 2?
I get up at 7. Yeah, but that's for the coffee shop. That's because we run a coffee shop. So
Well,
yeah, I
it
get up
must
at
be good
6:30 or
coffee.
7. Yeah, but I take a nap. A lot of times I'll take a nap. And I only do that when I'm under deadline. I'm only writing 1 book a year, so I really am only doing that for 3 weeks a year. Yeah. So that's the time I write, like at a more, I'll just write like in the afternoon, like I'll grab an hour or 2 when I can. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Okay. That's hard. I'm not writing then. I like to sleep then.
It's
There's
hard,
that
but I
enough.
love it. But I love it. You know, it's like I get start getting giddy like when the end of the day is coming because I know like it'll, you know, I'm about to have my like my me time.
Nice, nice. Okay, so you mentioned a little bit earlier about beta readers.
Yeah.
How did that change from beginning when, maybe you don't know so many writers and you're trying to find beta readers versus now? Do you use beta readers and where did they come from?
So early on, I've always used beta readers, especially when I was self-published and especially with my self-published books. And in the very beginning, when I had no audience and no connections and no anything, I just put a form up on like Facebook and was just like, hey, does anybody know someone who likes XYZ type books? I put like a one-liner of the book and I said, I'm looking for beta readers. So they'll get a free advance copy of the book and I'll send them a signed copy of the book when it's live. And I had like 20 people sign up. And I sent them, and I still do this with new betas and almost with all betas. I sent them like 10 questions because, especially if they're a new beta, they don't really know how to give feedback. And it really helps if you give them some questions. So I would give them questions about things that I was concerned about. And then I'd also just be like, what was your favorite scene in the book? What was your least favorite? Was there a point in the book where you found yourself setting it down or where it was hard for you to continue? Was there anything about the book that annoyed you? That sort of thing. Like, was there anything you really liked about this book? And it was funny, like some of the like scenes that I was thinking about cutting out were some people's favorite scenes, so it's like a lot of those things you just don't realize,
Right.
until you ask those questions. And you're gonna have some crappy betas and you're gonna have some really good ones. And what I did is just with each book, the really good ones I kept and the crappier ones, I mean, I hate to say it's crappy, but like some people that's not their forte. I would release. And you have some that are like too nice and I would always just say, please be, this is anonymous feedback. I would not ask them to put their name on the thing. I'd say, please be honest. Like I have thick skin, I can take it. Granted, I do have thick skin and I can take it. But so if you are a more sensitive writer in terms of feedback and it messes with your creative process, but if you're at the point of beta reader, the book's already done, ideally take as much, hits as you can. Nowadays, my traditionally published books, they have beta readers. Nowadays, my beta readers are almost all paid betas and they're almost like editors. I mean, I don't pay a ton. I pay like $250 for each. And I only have 2 or 3 of them. And they're people who have read my books. They know my audience. They know, they understand my writing style and it appeals to them. And so it's worth it to have that kind of more professional relationship.
Nice. Yeah, I know when you start, it's pretty hard to give your book to somebody else. That very first copy that goes
Oh,
out.
it's terrifying. Oh my gosh, yes.
Like,
So yeah.
no,
And
I want
then and then it could be like a couple weeks. My son writes military science fiction. He found some really good ones on Fiverr. They were like $15-20 and he got some great feedback. And because it is like a business transaction, like they're going to deliver.
Yep.
Because a lot of like he also did a free call out for betas and he sent out like 10, I think like 2 people like that he sent the book back actually gave feedback.
Nice. All right, so that's beta reader. So we've got like 5 minutes left. Anybody in the audience have anything they want to ask Alessandra? You can ask in chat or you can come off mute and ask about where you're at in your process, where you're at in your book, anything like that. And in the meantime, I see that Lisa's put up the link to Inkers Con, so I hope everybody's going to come to that. It's going to be a really good couple of weeks, I think, with lots of very interesting speakers there.
Yeah, we have a
Um,
great lineup.
yeah, it's a really great lineup with all kinds of learnings for everybody there that
And if you attend, I encourage you also attend the live attendee chats because like we did the same thing at the live conference where it's just like, hey, like we want to get together and talk for 20 minutes about like ways to improve like our writing speed. And you just learn the coolest things. I was sitting in one of them and we were talking about ways to improve our writing speed. And somebody was talking about how 8-bit music, like video game music, the video game creators have spent millions in creating music that someone doesn't get sick of listening to, right? Like it engages your brain and it's entertaining, but it's not distracting from the game. You're not going to like get pulled out of the game to listen to it, but also you don't get sick of it. So it's why you can listen to like Mario Kart music for 3 hours while playing it, like without getting tired of it. And I was like, oh my gosh, I love that. So now I've been listening to video game soundtracks when I write because it's just great, like background. I
Yeah.
need something to like blot out the TV in the next room and the, you know, distractions. But it's just a great writing soundtrack. So I've loved that.
Fantastic. Carolyn wants to know what posts on social media get the best results for you? Do you have one that was just a zinger?
So the posts that get the best results are funny writing memes and reading memes. But unfortunately, in terms of results, it gets the most engagement and interactions and shares, but it doesn't get the best sales. It doesn't generate any sales. We had one that we posted that went viral and it had like 6 million views, but I only got like a couple hundred followers from it, and they certainly didn't buy a book. So I do a variety of social media posts, and one thing I taught recently at a class I gave was that you have to realize that your readers are all very different. Like they are connected by the fact that they like your type of book or your writing. But some of them are going to be motivated to buy because of an excerpt. Some of them are going to be motivated to buy because they're blind and they listen to audiobooks and it's really important to them what the narrator sounds like. Other ones, are trope dependent. So whenever I post on social media and in my emails, like I'll send out 4 or 5 different emails about a book. And one of them will focus on like reader reviews, because for them, what's important is like social proof or like knowing that a real person liked this book. Another might focus on like my inspiration for the book, or they want more of a personal connection to the book. So I'll talk about like why I really connected to creating like this main character. Another one might be an excerpt. Another one might be like a video, like not a video, but like a photo. A teaser. So I would vary your content, because even if you might not get great engagement on all of them, they're going to touch different viewers and different readers differently. And they all have different like purchase triggers.
Nice. All righty. So we got one more comment here. Music while writing depends on my mood, says Steve. Usually classic rock, 80s hair bands, but also classic country, movie soundtracks, and even Gregorian chant. Now I'm seeing 80 hair bands.
I see a question from Lisa. She said, I loved Every Last Secret. It would make a great movie. Any interest from Hollywood? Yes, it's optioned for right now. It's optioned for a mini series, and the showrunner attached right now is actually doing it as it's like an Indian couple that is Kat and William. And it brings in their whole family. The ghostwriter was under option. It stopped, but actually the Girl in 60 was just optioned and has a studio attached. So if anything is going to happen quickest, it's Sony, who just purchased The Girl in 60 as a TV series. So if you're interested, that's a book I would read. But it is kind of like adult at times. So I just want everybody that. Yeah.
That is fantastic. I mean, woohoo, yay. Now, if Lucy were here, Lucy's our community manager. She would have pom-poms out cheering you. That's her. She literally would have pom-poms out right now.
Like half of the people Zoom, like when they make like hand gestures, oh my gosh, I'm like in the middle of a storm here. When they make hand gestures, it does like Zoom effects, but I don't know why.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't reproduce it. I'll get hearts or balloons, but I don't know when.
Yeah,
I don't know when it does it.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah,
it's magic. So just before we cut off, I just want to mention to everybody on Saturday, I'm going to come on around 1. I haven't posted the event in the community yet, but I'm going to go through all of the new software features in Fictionary. We just released, just as Fictionary, the AI version of scene structure. And so it's automatically doing your entry hook, your exit hook, your scene climax, your scene middle, etc. So I'm going to go through how to use that. So if you want to see that, I'll be on Saturday around 1, and I'll stick a post up either later today or tomorrow. So before everyone hung up, I wanted to say that. Yeah. So Alessandra, thank you so much. That was a fabulous hour. Really appreciate it. Love learning all new things. And it's really kind of fun to get insight into your life and how this is all working with you. So really appreciate it. Thank you.
I was so happy to be here. Thank you all. Thank you for your fantastic comments and questions. And yeah, I'm really excited. I hope to see some of you guys at InkersCon. I see Lisa's comment that I love Fictionary. I can't wait to try it out. So yeah, I was checking out the site right before this. So yeah, I'm really excited.
Nice.
Guys.
Nice. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye.